Okay, so thank you Jason and everyone. I want to start by thanking the ANZREG committee and also Ex Libris for the opportunity to travel to Norway with the grant to attend IGeLU. I certainly think I've made the most of the opportunity, and my feedback, I guess, is focused a lot around the value of user communities. So this is going to make a lot more sense if I can give you some context about the University of Sunshine Coast. So we're a regional university just north of Brisbane in Queensland, and we've implemented ALMA and Primo in December last year. And throughout that implementation, we took up the opportunity to become an early adopter of Leganto reading lists as well. So we migrated from 3 separate systems. The first was our Virtua library management system. We also had ProQuest 360 ERMS suite, including the link resolver, and we have had EBSCO EDS discovery for a couple of years. So we have had Virtua, or we had it Virtua since 1996 when the university was established, and we had been using ProQuest ERMS as it started with serial solutions since 2007. So the context, I guess, that I want to highlight is the lack of user communities that we experience with those systems, and with the takeover of serial solutions by ProQuest, we experienced a decline in those formal opportunities to provide feedback and really contribute to product development. Serial Solutions had actually organised a lot of feedback forums associated with events and conferences such as Info Online, and it was really an opportunity for us to provide input into that product development. So it was frustrating and disappointing when these opportunities began to decline. So my focus for this presentation is really about the user communities really make a difference. With Virtua, there was no Virtua user community in Australia as such. There were only 4 universities who used it, and we were all regional, so it was quite difficult for us to get together, but we did the best we could. Being a US-based vendor, VTLS, for us, we had little scope for advocacy with them. Being such a small market, we were essentially quite voiceless. Although VTLS had discussion lists and also an enhancement voting system, a lot of the outcomes for product development were heavily influenced from the North American and Europe market. So one of the main reasons, I guess, for us selecting ALMA and Primo was that there was such a supportive Ex Libris ANZ user community. And as we've worked through the ALMA implementation, and now we've had it for nearly a year, I guess what really impresses me so much about Ex Libris is that they're willing to listen and really wanting to seek that feedback and ideas for enhancement from the libraries who are using it. And what's most impressive, I guess, is they're actually doing something with that information and that feedback and those ideas that they're getting. So they've created the forums to make that communication happen. So attending the IGeLU conference was obviously seeing how the product working groups feed that information back. The voting system, the discussion lists, and also the regional user group meetings. It's really good that Ex Libris as a company publishes the roadmaps, so they're freely available to, I guess, all the libraries so we can see where they're heading, and the product release timeframes seem to be adhered to. It's really great that we have such a strong ANZ regional group, and as well as the international user community. So they're always feeding those product ideas back to Ex Libris. So I found with the IGeLU conference very much that it's providing that opportunity to come together and bring all those ideas and developments into one place. So for us, and I think I put this in my grant application, it's like going from a barren wasteland in terms of a user community to an oasis. Oops, what's happened here? Sorry, my mouse moved. Let me just get that back up. Sorry about that. So it's not perfect, but we've come from also almost nothing. So it means a very great deal for us to be part of something bigger and so positive as that international community. So at the IGeLU conference, I mostly attended the product sessions, the Q&A sessions, and also the product working group business meetings, just to see what the, I guess, the product development updates. There's also, sorry, I'm having problems with my laptop here. It was also fantastic to be able to submit questions before the conference. As a first timer, I was really interested to see whether they would get up, if they would be answered. It was fantastic in the Q&A session that the Ex Libris people actually went through 29 questions that were addressed, and all my questions actually were answered. So it was really great to get that response and have that vendor go through, you know, the questions coming back from the libraries and also questions from the audience. I also attended IGeLU, I guess, from the perspective that I had a number of focal areas and issues that I hope would be kind of answered. The first, I guess, was the concern about the ProQuest merger and the implications for future development of particularly Ex Libris products and also the roadmaps. For us migrating to Alma, we had quite a few issues, I guess, with our staff adjusting to an online environment, and we had feedback from our staff about the excessive clicking and navigation. And also being such a small library, I guess some of the workflows that are in Alma weren't actually applicable, where you've got a small team doing most of the job and clicking through work orders. It actually isn't that efficient for us to have to go through all of those steps. From the Primo side of things, we'd come from the really positive experience of the EDS implementation, so we struggled a bit with configuring Primo, activating metadata, and I guess we're still adjusting to the reliability of accessing full text. So that was where I was coming from in terms of what I wanted to get from IGeLU conference as well. So I'm happy to report that all of my questions were really answered. Very pleased to hear that the merger with ProQuest and Ex Libris will have no impact on roadmaps or their commitment to the product development. From the point of view of takeaways for our staff particularly, which I thought might be helpful to share with the ANZ group, is the new Primo user interface and also the integrations with ProQuest summon functionality is really good to hear. So the enhancement of the metadata from the ProQuest knowledge base and the fantastic thing that we're really missing coming from EDS is a resource recommender. So this has actually placed us in a good position to contribute to its development because our librarians have really clear and strong ideas about what we would like in a recommender based on our EDS success. And at IGeLU I was able to make really direct contact with the Senior Product Manager of Discovery and Delivery, so that was another fantastic opportunity of attending IGeLU. So we're very keen to actually contribute our ideas for its development, and I dare say that our librarians are going to have quite a lot to say about it. It was great to hear that Ex Libris is planning a redesign of Alma. Particularly that's something I'm going to be sharing with the rest of our staff. So they've taken on board the fact that libraries are struggling in some cases with staff the excessive clicking, so they're beginning to look at that navigation within Alma itself. Another thing that I was interested to hear was the expanded analytics reporting, and particularly bringing the benchmarking and trend functionality from in-total assessment, which is coming from ProQuest, and also the expansion of the counter uploads and that usage reporting via analytics. And being part of the Leganto early adopter group is really the development of Leganto copyright particularly. So knowing all of this is really going to make a big difference with our planning and as we move forward with ALMA and begin to implement more functionality. So I'll be sharing this very much with our staff, but also with other virtual libraries who are implementing ALMA or have just done so. So as an early adopter of Leganto, really helped to contribute to its development. So just to, I guess, summarise for us is the value of the user communities. So coming from nothing, attending IGeLU was, and becoming involved more in the ANZ regional community is like a breath of fresh air. And given the focus areas I was seeking answers to, as I said, I mostly attended the product development sessions. So I've been able to see how these product working groups really engage with ex-libris and the developers, and how libraries can engage with the process and advocate functionality enhancements. And particularly that's around the ANZ context where we're working with Leganto copyright development. I've also seen how ex-libris really responds to this feedback, how a lot of it's already been taken on board and is already planned for future development. As I've touched upon, attending IGeLU's another valuable outcome is really making that contact with the developers and contributing to the functionality development. That's actually going to be a good way for us to engage the rest of our staff in the process as well. So they're bringing ideas and thinking about how they would like the system to develop and how they would like to start using it. So I will be bringing obviously a lot of that back to our own library and also engaging them with the process and sharing with other communities such as QLOC, which is the Queensland University Libraries Office of Cooperation, and I'm keeping in, I guess, a contact with the ex-virtual libraries who are now using ALMA and sharing that as well. So thank you. I guess I'll hand back to Jason.
Great, thanks Meredith, that was excellent. I'm just going to, I'll mute your microphone, and I'm just going to find Stacey on our list here. And Stacey, you should get a request in just a moment to become the next presenter. There we go.
Can you see my screen and hear me?
Yep, I can see your screen. It's just a little bit faint, not too bad. From memory, you're using a microphone, aren't you? An external microphone?
No, we're in a large room with a lot of staff. So can you hear me now?
That's much better, thank you.
Great, thanks. So like Meredith, I'll give a little bit of context from UQ Library perspective. So we were coming to IGeLU as first timers, not just to the conference, but also as first timers who literally just gone live. So I've done a little bit of our timeline that I did up during our implementation to show how much of a change it was for our institution. So we went from Millennium and Summon to ALMA and Primo, and we've been with Millennium for 20 years before moving to ALMA, so that was a mighty change. In terms of discovery layers, we had a bit more recent change, starting off with Encore in 2008, Summon in 2010, Summon 2.0 in mid-2014, and then we kicked off the new project to transition to integrated LSP ALMA Primo at the end of 2015. So we had a 9-month project with Eric and myself as full-time seconded to this project. And we also have what I call a cast of thousands of 22 staff from around the library. But it really was needed because, unlike Meredith, I suppose we've got a quite large staff group. So we had basically experts and specialists from around the library who helped us with the implementation and make sure it all went smoothly. We actually had 2 months of higher support rather than the usual of 1 month. So we switched to support on 27th of August after I go live on the 27th, June. And then that coincided with this IGeLU in early September. So we literally switched to support and then we closed the project and then we flew to Norway. So it was a bit of a whirlwind both in terms of the project and going to IGeLU. So in terms of what I got out of the conference, we went to, one of our key things was that we'd just gone live and we had some key issues that we needed resolving. So it was great to have a personal one-on-one session with 2 of the heads of support at IGeLU, which was Judith and Evgenia. Judith is based out of Israel and the Director of Support Tier 2 and 3, and Evgenia, who's the Support Manager for Tier 1. So we presented, these are our key issues that we presented and what stage we're up to now, which is we had an issue with known ALMA items which were missing from Primo, and that was luckily resolved, although it did take a little while to get that resolved. Our second one was full text discovery in Primo, which ended up being with a few support cases and a bit of consultation with the community, just basically our learning curve of moving from Summon to Primo and recognising the differences between those discovery layers. And then we've got performance issues with ALMA and Primo, which unfortunately are unresolved and ongoing to different extents, which I think Dave will probably talk about in his session. Overall for the conference, I tend to think that conferences seem to be going with a lot of sessions and there's a lot of concurrent sessions, and I always feel like I want to go to more sessions than I can. So I ended up attending 17 of 65 sessions, and like Meredith, I attended mostly ex-Libris run plenary sessions in product development. There was a great one on the Primo new UI. The Q&A that Meredith mentioned as well was great, and there was a session on ALMA Analytics. There were a few user-run sessions on ALMA Analytics, but the one I really enjoyed was Groll's, who's an ex-Libris senior librarian who's absolutely amazing, and I wish I just could have spent those 4 days with him picking his brain. Takeaways from those sessions, particularly the new UI, which we'll be implementing next year, so we're still on the old system at the moment, is during our implementation, we probably did a little bit more configuration customization in the early stages, and they were saying at the session with things like people complaining about or worried about things like infinite scroll, is that once people have gone live with the new UI, that they're finding that users like it. So to just do out of the box and see how you go, basically, get user testing that show that change is needed rather than assuming what your users will want, which I think is a good takeaway that blends in with our experience from implementation. And also with the ALMA Analytics, we're going to be kicking off a working group with staff from across the library, because we've got feedback that that's an area that's our staff are particularly interested in fully utilising all the benefits of ALMA Analytics. So it was definitely great to see things like the counter usage stats going into there more as well. The best benefits I've taken away, it is a bit of a blur, and I had to go back through the conference program to remind myself of all the little things that I gained. But as much as I hate mingling and networking, it was great to have an opportunity to meet with especially other APAC institutions. For example, we made connections with Meredith at USC and Jessie Donahue at Bond, and I've consulted with Jessie about the Primo full text discovery, and she helped me to solve that problem. And we've had discussions with Meredith as well to solve other things, and it was great to meet and chat with Dave as well from SLQ. And I think as well, just seeing faces, and you know, I think there were over 450 people at the conference, but it gives you more confidence to post things to the listservs, to ask questions, to contribute what's happening in your instance, help other people. So it just puts those faces to names to help with us to move forward and to be confident about our current system and where it's going now, which, as Meredith noted, I'm really excited about the new Alma user interface as well, which looks great, so I'm keeping up to date with those videos that are coming out on that progress as well. So I think that's all I had to add, so I'll throw back to Jason.
Great, thanks Stacey. Now, is Eric in the same room as you, using the same connection?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, Eric, I'll hand over to you. I don't need to pass the virtual mic. It's already open for you.
All right, cool. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm slightly further away, but I'm louder. So,
that's nice and clear.
Yeah.
We're just going to put that in slideshow mode. So my slides are great. Okay, so the developer day was essentially tacked on to the end of the conference and sort of largely integrated with the conference, I suppose. There was, according to the blurb, 143 attendees, and they were from lots of places, mostly Europe, North America, APAC, but there were a few others as well. Luckily, it was all conducted in English, which was kind of handy, which I can understand some of it. And I put there was a website developed for it, which is that one there. I'm amazed they managed to get that domain, but they did. If you go there, you can check out some of the details, including the actual program. And you'll see on that site the sessions. So I've sort of given a list of the sessions with some of the details. If you want more detail, you can go to the site. The whole thing was recorded and is on YouTube in 4 different sort of sessions or 4 different chunks. And I'll put the detail here. But I'm just going to sort of give you my impressions of highlights of it, if you like. And I'll go back and forth between these 2 slides while I do it. So you can see, if you want to actually check it out on YouTube, what the different parts are. One of the things, and I suppose I echo Meredith's in particular comments on, there's a very large contingent of ex-Libris people at the conference, and there was also a very large contingent of the sort of heavy ex-Libris players in the development environment. Josh Weissman, I think, is the Director of Development. Noam Amit is a fairly hardcore one of their developers. So they did some very good presentations, which is going to be straight from the horse's mouth, if you like. So that now we're talking the two-way communication one. So that's actually Josh Weissman. He's talking about webhooks. So to me, this was very interesting. It's very early days, but essentially they make a big deal out of and are doing some very good work in making the ex-Libris products in the cloud, an open platform. And I think this webhooks is going to be a big part of that. They already have a very large number of really quite well documented and useful APIs that we can use. We are having, I'm sure Dave's going to talk about this, there's some questions around the actual performance and brittleness maybe of the API servers, but the actual APIs and the documentation are really quite well developed. Webhooks is going to add to that because webhooks is now one of the integrations that you can set up in Alma. And what it enables you to do is basically have event-driven orchestration based out of events that are happening in Alma. So instead of, for example, having to sort of poll for things happening repeatedly through the APIs to find out if something's happened, so you can then do something at your end with it. Webhooks give you an opportunity to essentially have a listener, and you can set up an integration that says, okay, well, I'm going to register that listener, and when an event happens in Alma, and at the moment the only event that they've got this working for is job end, it'll actually push, it'll post in fact to your listener to basically say that the event has occurred, and you can then orchestrate from there. So in our case, for example, one of the things that we have is our ERP integration, so ERP, so we export invoices from Alma, they go off to an FTP site, we then sort of have a cron job that picks them up 15 minutes after we expect them to have been put there, and does a bunch of processing and sends it off to our finance system. With the webhook at job end, in theory, we would be able to do a thing where we could actually, instead of just running a cron and waiting the 15 minutes to hopefully it ended after the 15 minutes, we'd be able to configure it to actually post a notification via the webhook that would allow us to actually make sure that it had completed before we ran it. So we have had a couple of occasions when the job didn't finish in the 15 minutes, and I suppose what webhook sort of enables us to do is a better integrated orchestration of those kind of workflows that flow beyond Alma into other platform stuff. Now, we haven't done anything with it yet, and in fact, in that particular instance, given that the job can send an email at the end, you can already orchestrate based on the job end from just piping that email into a script. I don't want to go into too much detail because I don't know. I know that no one else in this room is a developer, and I don't know how many developers are out there. So I'll go on. Just a couple more highlights. I won't go through all. The David Lewis from Curtin, I don't know if he's here at this, but he did an interesting presentation on a Perl library that he's developed to work with Primo and Alma Analytics. So Alma Analytics, it sort of held out a lot of promise. I guess we are still in the early days with trying to work with it. So, but there are a few limitations to it that we've already found. One of the things that you can do with things like David's Perl API is get around a couple of those limitations. University of Washington already developed a Python API library to do a similar thing, but David's is, again, I don't want to go into too much detail, but it's based on the Perl DBI database abstraction. So it's actually really, it's a very good idea, and he's done quite a good job of it. It gets around some of the limits. So, for example, the 64K row export limit that you'll hit potentially working directly in analytics, you can overcome by using the API and having a library to do that, and to use filters and things in the way that David has implemented it. Looks really very useful. Again, we haven't really done anything with it. The next one, and this is all part of it. This is all part of part one, I think, here of the on the YouTube videos, which are mostly useful. There's a couple of dropouts, and most of the on-screen code segments and snippets are actually visible, so they're actually quite useful YouTube videos. But the Primo product working group sort of did what they call a bunch of lightning talks based on their impressions of working with the new user interface. So again, I'm doing this, I suppose, more from a developer perspective, but I won't go into too much detail. But because the new UI is a fairly radical difference. It's implemented in ANGULAR.js, which is a front-end development framework, JavaScript framework. It's a significant change to the existing UI, and there's a couple of people who did demonstrations of how they did some basic customization, not just of the UI, front-end visual elements, so the user interface elements, like changing colours and putting your logos in and stuff, but also a couple of actual bits of functionality enhancements. And in the part 2 of that Google stuff, it starts off with a couple of the ex-Libris developers describing their approach to UX development, and in particular, again, demonstrating how to work with the Node.js customization dev environment. So you can download this dev environment and even run it on a laptop or wherever you like. Node.js is a sort of a back-end, sometimes described as framework. It's actually an enhancement to the JavaScript language, really, but however you like to think of it. You can actually have a whole dev environment running on whatever machine you like. Configure it to say, I'm going to talk to this proxy server, which might be your real live Primo, and it's view specific, so you can do it for a view, or even just run it all locally using Node.js and do whatever development you like. Once you've got your developments all, worked out and hopefully committed to a code repository, you can just actually deploy them live without any real changes, and you can share them, and people are starting to share them. So that's really quite a good way of being able to develop. Again, we're just going back to that first component, that first bit about the webhooks. Josh actually did show how you could do some orchestration, and he did 3 different cloud-based ones. He did one where he used a webhook to cause an SMS to be sent via a Heroku platform as a service module. He did another one where he used Lambda functions in AWS to do a similar thing. And then he actually did another one using Microsoft's Azure. So these are all cloud platform as service type or infrastructure as service type offerings. He did one with Azure where he got a job to run exporting views effectively, and then had a webhook listener in Azure that then reprocessed it from the FTP location and did an XML transform and then sent it on. So that was quite interesting. I'm just going to go one more highlight because I think I'm probably going a bit long and probably boring everybody. Certainly everyone's going blank around the room here. But, sorry, the 10 minutes racing at me. The main one I'll just focus on is method select. So part 3 starts with method select. So if you want to take that one out, that's very good. Some of you, especially developers, might have worked with the jQuery Primo library, which Mehmet developed for the current sort of Primo environment. He didn't really want to extend that any further into the new environment, but he actually did. He did do this presentation where he basically did a conversion of an existing widget that was for a collection viewer. So I think that did images from one of the museums that he works with, and embedded that into Primo. And he had done that for the existing Primo using his jQuery Primo library. And he wanted to just look at working with a new UI, so he converted that into an AngularJS component, which can be used with the new UI. And he sort of described in some pretty good detail what he was doing and how he did it, and the MVC, so the model view controller model that is part of the AngularJS and other aspects of the new environment. And that's really quite worth a look if you're interested in developing any Angular extensions to the new one. Again, there was a few others. I didn't think, I guess after 3 days of conference and then a day of presentations in the developer day, I was a bit over it by then. but certainly there's some pretty good stuff. Some of it was just about people's experiences of trying to do things. So Matthias Einbrot that I mentioned there, developing a mobile app. I think he kind of jumped the gun and went a bit early and ran into a bunch of issues and probably won't do it again. But anyway, it was very interesting to see the reports that people had about their developments. And there was an extra session snuck in at the end by Theo Engelman, who's, I think, the chair of the IGeLU conference, so I think he could get away with it. But again, because I was with Alf, it was of limited interest, and it was the end of the day. Anyway, I'll leave it there. And if anyone has any questions, they can probably ask at the end. So I'll pass back to this one.
That's great. Thanks, Eric. I'll just pass on now to Dave. Now you should get a request now, Dave, in a second. There we go.
Cool. Thanks for that. I'll just bring up. I've got a really comprehensive PowerPoint display. It's all at one page, so. Oops, you don't want to see that. Just change the screen. You want to see that. What screen are you seeing at the moment? Ah, so you've got my screen there, haven't you, Jason?
I'm just seeing the... Actually, I'm not seeing your screen at the moment. If you've clicked the icon at the top, you can actually switch it off by mistake and it stops sharing, so it needs to be green, that little screen icon. Ah, there we go, I can see it now.
Yep, cool. So, yeah, sorry about that, I just got distracted by something else at the same time I was trying to do this. There you go. I'm just to bring you up to speed, I'm on the IGeLU steering committee. Before me there was Fiona from Inquiry and also Simon from Latrobe/Monash, where he's done a fairly good route. So I'm third in line from this whole process. So I'm on the steering committee, on the liaison with a lot of the product working groups. It's good to hear that some people found the conference useful, because it's always good to get that sort of feedback. I'd also like to thank you for voting me back in again. If you didn't, who cares, but you did vote me in, so thank you very much. So I'll just run you up to speed. The next IGeLU conference will be in St. Petersburg in Russia. We're currently working through the conference program as it speaks now. We did look at the issue of so many sessions over 3 days. We'll be issuing a survey within the next month or so, asking feedback from you guys, the community, about whether or not we're trying to do too much in too short a period of time. Maybe we can actually spread it over more days. I don't know how we're going to do it, so we'll try to work something out there. So we want to get that feedback from you guys. It won't come out for at least another month or so. So one of the big things we brought up with Ex-Libris during this meeting, because we have these face-to-face meetings with Ex-Libris. Our meetings actually start on 2 days before the actual conference. And one of the big topics was how the APAC region made the top list of largest amount of outage times at all for the whole cloud centers, for all the data centers, which is something we don't really want, but we managed to cop it. So we took that up with Ex-Libris. They've committed to notifying us a lot better when these things happen, and I've been watching the issues that they've been having in North America, and they're pretty quick now to jump in and say, we are having problems, we are investigating, you know, like with that DDoS attack that they had. It doesn't mean that we should be lax on them, because otherwise they'll just fall back into their old ways, but we're going to keep an eye on it. We are concerned about the data center, how it's performing. We have a feeling within the committee that maybe the data center needs more resources because it's running as a private cloud. and we think maybe they have to pump more resources into the centre to bring it up to spec. They won't say yes or no about that, but they are aware of the issues. We are also concerned about the lack of redundancy of the comms connections into that data centre. They had a problem at one stage. They had an outage where a contractor dug up their comms links out the front and took out the whole data centre. And in theory, they're supposed to be coming from diverse links and from diverse directions. So we weren't really happy about that. And I think most of the Q&A that was discussed within Exlibris, especially during the presentations, they came back constantly to the APAC issues. So they are aware of it, and they have copped a bit of a hammering on that. But ANZREG as a whole will continue monitoring it and escalate accordingly on behalf of the group. So as part of the whole the IGeLU thing, we raised the question about Alma and why they were spending all their time working on social life. They were talking about creating accounts into Alma, using your Facebook or something like that. And that's when they kind of like dropped that they are no longer going to support internal authentication of patron records, user accounts. So user accounts not only include your patrons, but also your staff accounts, any what do you call it? Community accounts or anything like that will no longer be, their passwords will no longer be stored in Alma. And this is part of this ISO 27018 certification they went through. They got certified, but they had a clause in it where they have to move the passwords out of the application into another system. So that's where it's come from. That means it's going to cause us a lot of grief, especially not only within the ANZREG community, but across the whole community in whole. I know State Library New South Wales online, probably not, but I know all their records are all internal authentication. So we're currently working with Exlibris to try and find a solution to resolve this issue. We obviously want a good solution that works and it doesn't cost us anything, so we'll see how we go there. But as part of this process, we'll be issuing a survey, so we will a survey in the next 2 weeks, where we're going to ask the community to provide information on your environment. We need to know like number of accounts you got, number of internally authenticated accounts. How easy is it going to be to move your internal accounts to another authentication system? How does your local, your central IT feels about these sort of activities? So we're trying to get a feel of how the community feels. So we're trying to gauge that information so we can go back to Exlibris and say, well, the problem's bigger than what you think. Here we are. They are talking about using something like Azure or something like that, but we'll see how that goes. And that's been consuming a fair bit of our time and having to deal with Alma and Bar. If you met Bar, he's an interesting man at the best of times. One other issue that came up pretty heavily through the conference and through the pre-conference meetings was that APAC, being the lucky buggers that we are, when they release upgrades into Alma, we, by default, because of our geographical location, New Zealand and then us in Australia, get exposed to all the defects in that release. Which is good because by the time they get to Europe, they normally have those problems fixed. But it's bad for us because we wasted a whole day chasing these defects and trying to get something done about it. So we've come to agreement within the community, with the steering committees, IGeLU and Exlibris, that if you log a core that's a defect after an upgrade, and the issue is that it was working pre-upgrade, now it's broken, if you can put regression into the subject line, that will then trigger a higher alert system at Exlibris, and will pay more attention to those calls because they're committed to resolving those regression issues as quickly as possible, which is only fair. So if you can do that, that'd be really good. Please indicate that is a regression and make sure you put in your text that it used to work, now it doesn't, so that kind of helps a bit because that's the way they work. I think that's about all we have to say here. IGeLU, as you said, as we pointed out before, IGeLU is here to serve the community, so if there are any issues, you can come directly to IGeLU. ANZREG is the representation for our area, and ANZREG has got a pretty good relationship with senior members of IGeLU. They do sit up and listen to us. There was a big meeting that was held 5 months ago, wasn't it, Jason?
Yeah, would have been about that, yeah.
Yeah, where we started raising the whole issues of the APAC. They did take it seriously. We just have to keep on reinforcing that message back to them. But they are listening to us. Probably we'd wish them to move faster on some things, but these things don't seem to happen sometimes. We also like to thank all the members on all the PWGs and the coordinators on the PWGs, because that's what makes everything work. So we have a very strong representation in the ANZREG area into those PWGs. We've got like Sue Harmer, who's the coordinator of Liganto. We've got Helen from Unilink, who's the deputy coordinator of ALMA. So we've got people everywhere within the community active in those product working groups, and they bring a bit more of a balanced view to these product working groups to ensure that our regional requirements are met, or at least discussed, if nothing else. So we will be probably doing a call soon for more people to join some of the special interest working groups, in particular the analytics and the linked open data groups. There are vacancies at the moment, and if you are interested, when you see them or when you see these emails come out, if you put your hand up, it would be greatly appreciated. It helps lighten the load for the PWG or the special interest working group. And that's that for me. Thank you.
Great, thanks Dave. Appreciate that. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take control back to me, and that will continue to keep all the microphones muted. Now if anyone's got any questions, there is a little chat interface, and you can type that in, and I'm just having a look. Now I've just got one here from Flinders University. Has anyone implemented Google or Facebook Patron self-registration in ALMA? The documentation regarding how this works for the user and how it hangs together is pretty scant. What I'll do is I'll see if I can be smart and unmute the microphones for our presenters, and then we can all kind of respond. Here we go. So I'm just unmuting your microphones. There we go. So I don't know if anyone's got a response to that. It almost sounds like a kind of an Eric sort of question, perhaps. I don't know. Patron self-registration.
Just one thing there, Jason. I'm not aware of anyone having done that. Nothing about that came up in the developers day that I'm aware of. However, it's probably something that anyone here can answer, but that's the sort of thing that I'd probably be wanting to suggest you put into the ALMA list, as a general question to the community.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. Yeah, I agree to put it out there. And also what came up before about obviously the whole thing with the authentication and having, Ex-Libris moving away from having passwords stored in ALMA, and that whole issue. There's a few things there around whether people want to use OAuth, and they want to use Facebook or Google to authenticate. I know that's a wider question, but it's something we've looked at, not for ALMA, but for other systems. So yeah, okay. Now, has anyone else got any questions?
So Jason, just a quick one.
Yes.
I sometimes think Ex Libris does these knee-jerk reactions, so that they had like this 27,018 issue, so they went full steam ahead into Facebook and the Open Auth, thinking that will solve all their issues and everyone in the community will go that way. But as soon as they sold it to us that way, there was like places like in Europe where they have very strict privacy rules. They went nutso about it all. And if you got Primo hosted, you would have seen the latest debacle with the capture block. That was discussed last night at the Primo product manager meeting, and that was like a knee-jerk reaction from, it turns there's a lot of mail phishing going on, and people are using Alma to do mail floods out to different institutions. So they put this that Google capture thing in, and as you can tell from the list, it's caused all sorts of problems as well. So they admitted it was probably not the smartest thing they've done, but they are working at resolving that issue. I also forgot to mention Annette Shriver as well. She's also on the Primo product working group, so if you've got any questions about Primo, you can also flag it with Annette as well. Over here.
Thanks, Dave. Just a couple other questions that come up. One which is related to what you were just saying, from Swinburne, saying, when is the authentication change going to happen? So you're thinking, Dave, that perhaps Ex Libris may step back slightly from this approach where they say they're going to completely remove passwords, being local accounts, or do you think it's going to be a staggered sort of approach from them, or not?
No, it's not a case of if, it's a case of when.
Is that because of the ISO that they've signed up for?
Yeah.
Okay.
And we've raised all the issues. We think at this stage that they are pushing pretty hard. Well, they wanted it done like, second quarter of 2017. We told them no way in the world. But they are pushing pretty hard to get it done by the end of 2018.
Okay. I've got one more question from Unilink. I understand that social login from the Primo POV is not possible until after the Primo November release. Is that correct?
I don't have the new release. Annette, are you there at all?
Yeah, we're not installing the new Primo release until next month.
I think maybe that's something that we can, Annette can take up. Annette Schreier from Macquarie University, she can take it up with the Primo Product Working Group meeting that's coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it sounds like a good idea.
I can say that because she can't talk back to me.
Now I'm just going through the chat interface here. No more questions at the moment. Does anyone else have any questions? We still have a few minutes to run if anyone else has anything they'd like to ask. All right. Well, we might leave it at that. What I will do, because I know it can be a bit disconcerting when you're doing these presentations and you don't actually hear anybody in the audience, so to speak, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take off everyone's microphone so we can actually hear each other, and maybe we'll just sort of see if we can do a round of applause for all of our excellent presenters today. And I'll do that in just a sec. And one last thing to say, this has been recorded, so we will get this up on the ANZREG website next week, along with the PowerPoint slides, because it's those excellent videos that I want to have a look at too from Eric. I know one of my developers is already very interested in looking at those, Eric. Okay, so I'm just going to undo this, and thank you very much, everyone, for your time today.